Good morning, everyone, and welcome to American Scousers Morning Coffee or Tea with AmericanScouser.com. We're back in action after what, like 2-3 weeks off over here.
Yeah, 2 weeks, I
Getting to
think.
sleeping and stuff. It's been kind of like different and nice and odd in some ways. I have the coffee here as always this morning, so we got the grumpy mug going, and you have.
Coffee.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Making a huge start. It's making a huge start. So, yeah, we're going to actually change the format a little bit. Obviously, it's a new time. So, hopefully, like, we can name some of the people who are just kind of like rolling out of bed on the West Coast and stuff, too. And we figured in sort of like going through individual headlines, we kind of like focus more on ones that will create some discussion, get some feedback from the audience, and go about it that way. And obviously, with the games coming in nonstop, there'll be some game talk as well, but I don't want to focus as much on like the pregame and postgame. Leave those to those shows on the channel instead, and then kind of like focus on more about like the headlines and all that kind of good stuff. So we'll kind of like shoot back and forth over here. So if you have not heard this story right here, let's start with this. The coach, which is like he's like on the lower leagues, but John Yams, Alan is with us as always. Good morning, Alan. So I don't know if you know the story or if the audience knows the story, but this dude is pretty much as racist as it can come. I don't know how the independent panel can say it's not, because the examples that were given in there was a lot of like language, especially against like Muslim players and stuff like that. And I think like the common thing over the fact is like it's players over here, and he only had like an 18-month ban because the panel said that's not racist. He's just calling them terrorists. What's wrong with that? So obviously FA. So you think this is FA reacting to people like us? Because I know when it popped up on our Discord channel, there was like kind of like a what the kind of a response just based on on what he got, which was just like a slap on the wrist for a guy clearly being racist. You think the FA is like, holy shit, American Scouts or Discord channel is going ape shit, we got to do something about it? Or do they really are like, hey man, this is not really setting a good example, we're taking knees, bring out banners and shits, and then we're only giving this guy 18 months for calling people terrorists?
Yeah, I feel like if you get into some of the stuff that he said, and we're not going to say them on the show because it's beyond disgusting to even trying to repeat those things. So I think that only further creates more of the problem is by repeating and saying that over and over and over again. And I think, unfortunately, in this day and age, sometimes it takes more of public outrage to really make something appear worse than what someone thinks it is. So if a company makes a decision and then you get a ton of backlash from that and you go, wait a minute, okay, now that we're looking at it from the public's eye, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. Maybe that wasn't the right reaction that we had. And in this case, just looking at history, it's not like a one-off, right? Where there was one training session and he got really pissed at a single player and then said something to him. This was many things that were said over and over and over, and it was kind of, yes, there was a lot that was targeted towards Muslims, but it wasn't just that either. It was almost like a whole charcuterie board of bullshit. Not a good charcuterie board, obviously. So and that's what it takes, is just having some of that backlash and then realizing, okay, this is a lot worse than what we thought it was. And I feel like if they had started out with a bigger ban, it wouldn't be as bad. But 18 months is really, what is that? I mean, it's nothing. In context of his career, that's really nothing. Sending someone to prison for 18 months, that's something.
Yeah.
That will change you as a person. Banning you for 18 months when you're doing something like this already, not going to do much to your life.
Yeah, we probably do it too, right? And I know I've done it in the past. I probably shouldn't have, you have some inside jokes with certain people. And, we probably do, like off air, God knows on air. I love, by the way, how you are. I saw a Facebook post the other day that was made on American Scousers Facebook page referring to you publicly as the Polish Prince.
Oh, God.
And I'm proud to be... I'm proud to be the one who came up with that. I'm like, dude's official name has become Polish Prince. But anyway, like you can have some inside jokes maybe with one person that you do more than likely privately because other people might not realize it's like a inside joke that they're okay with. And it's usually somebody who you're very comfortable with. And even then it's risky to be honest with you, because sometimes people overstep their boundaries or kind of like oversee how close they are maybe and say some stuff. I know, like I might make a joke and you might make like a Turkish joke and stuff like that. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. He's doing it to multiple players. And I think it makes a difference when these people are, when I say below you, in terms of like you're their, in a way that you're their supervisor because the guy is the coach. So I think it makes a huge difference then, because then it's not even like peer. So you can't even say, I mean, the other guy can't even say, hey man, what the hell are you saying? Because
Yeah.
ultimately talking back to the supervisor and stuff. So
When it comes from a position of power,
yes,
it's much worse, right?
I think so.
Because you have that stronghold over that person. You have that emotional power and that actual physical power of your position, and I think that makes it much worse.
Yeah, and that's why, like, when I saw like the multiple things he said and the variety of times he said it, it's almost like he made it like a team inside joke. And I highly doubt these guys were like okay with it. So like 18 months, I don't know. Let's see what comes out of this. I take this as FA saying, hey man, this is making all of us look bad. What the hell is this 18 months? And I don't know how you read all that stuff as I mean, is it like an independent panel of racists looking at this? They're like, this is nothing compared to what I say. Because I don't know how they can like read that stuff and say, oh, it doesn't sound racist to me.
Yeah.
He made a couple of Islamic jokes. Come on,
who doesn't? It's just locker room talk. It's fine, you guys.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't believe that, and I think that's why FA is saying you guys got to be shitting me, making us all look bad over here. And I don't know. Let's see what comes out of it in terms of how much more it gets added on. But let's go to the next one. You got one for us.
Yeah, so I feel like going off of that. Is it working?
It's not. Oh, there we
go. Sorry, yes, I apologize. So kind of going off of that, the coach's side of things, kind of moving to the player side of things, right? So Jesse Lingard came out saying that to take the pain away, he would drink. Right when the abuse from United fans and his mom's battle with depression and poor form became too much to bear, and this is a big thing to have someone. I know we like to joke around right now that Jesse Lingard is not the player that he once was. Heralded one of England's next greats, and just it didn't really turn out that way. So we like to kind of poke fun and make jokes here, but sometimes it's easy to forget that these players are human beings at the end of the day. And I know sometimes it's difficult to grow up your whole life being told that you're so special, that being told you're the next big thing, you're the next great, wonderful thing. You get signed to these big clubs with all this history. And that can be a lot of pressure. And sometimes, for a lot of guys, it doesn't end well. There's only a handful of guys that could really say that they came up straight from the academy in the one place and had an astonishing career, and that they never received any backlash from the fans. They never really went through a ton of poor form. And so I feel like something like this, it's good to have him talk about it, because I think it opens the door for more athletes to try and talk about it more. I know here in the US, I know we like to bash on the US with things that are done here and how they're done here sometimes, but I think as far as mental health in sports goes, I think they do a pretty good job here in allowing the athletes to be more outspoken and to be more human about how they're feeling. And I feel like in England, it might still be, a little behind on the timeline, because there's that feeling of, that masculine feeling of, why is there something wrong? You're a footballer. It's fine. Be a man. Get over it. Like, stop being a little wuss. And I think sometimes it goes much deeper than that. And when you're in a locker room full of those kinds of guys, they're just trying to tell you to get over it and just be a man. It can get worse. You either suppress it and you battle it on your own, or you lash out. And then sometimes you lash out on people who don't deserve to be lashed out on, So I think him opening up about that is a good step, because you never always hear about this. And I feel like it does humanize players. And sometimes we do forget that, they are just like us and they go through things.
And I find that odd. You would think in a locker room, especially, you would have other people that have been there, done that, especially like older guys that will be like, dude, this is how it is. People are going to talk shit. But I think maybe it's being pushed on as it is what it is. You just got to live with it. And I know, see, like it doesn't specify. I think basically it was criticism more than anything else. I don't think it's specifying in terms of the kind of like abuse, because there's abuse and there's criticism, right? And I think this almost feels more like anything that was coming his way in terms of negative looks like, obviously it's gonna build up on you. Sparky Parky says we would just say man up. Would you say man up to, like, you might say, like we might say man up, right? Like as a fan, you might be outside and say, man up, you're making millions, blah blah blah, like say something like that. But if it was like as another player who's been there, done that, would you say man up? Maybe you had to man up. You're as an older player back in the day, like you're saying, Mateusz, you couldn't like kind of like be more open about it, so you had to man up. So I don't know if it's kind of like when I was your age, you just had to man up, man. This shit happens, or you would think it would be more like, hey, man, that stuff happens. Here's what you do, like you ignore it or whatever the case might be. And at the same time, that's easier said than done too. I think to say I just ignore it.
Yeah, and I feel like there are players, ex-players, who have come out and have said that, like, hey, you should just just get over and play, and it just kind of feeds into that circle of the same kind of crappy toxic mentality that everyone has had, and it doesn't get any better, because if you have the same guys just saying the same things over and over, it doesn't ever get better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to play devil's advocate, obviously the pressure, the more you're in the spotlight, the more famous / known you are, obviously the pressure is going to be more, and it probably makes it tougher to deal. If it was somebody Ryan says, happy birthday, by the way, Ryan. It just showed up on my Facebook feed.
Birthday.
Happy birthday to Ryan over here. Says somebody once told OJ Simpson to man up. I mean, that's the thing. It's just like one of those things where you don't want to assume and say, obviously the spotlight is a lot bigger, so it's a lot easier for him to get, like the negative criticism, because there's like, bazillion million followers. And it kind of, does it end up being, Mateusz, like it comes with the territory kind of thing more than anything else?
I mean, I feel like yes, because to an extent, right? Because anyone who's going to be on that level understands that there is going to be a level of scrutiny that comes with it. There's going to be, you are in the limelight, especially someone who's playing for Manchester United. You are going to be in the limelight for millions and millions and millions of people in the world. It's kind of the same way, actors and celebrities and everyone sort of, you're at the will of the people in a weird way, where anything that you do, that's going to be seen by so many people, and you kind of, you get, I don't know if you necessarily get, what am I trying to say? Losing
your daily morning brain fart.
Yeah, honestly. Short answer, yes, it comes with the territory, but also I feel like some fans still have to recognize that these people are still human beings. Yelling at someone that they're shit and they should go die. That stuff is pretty ridiculous. It's one of those things where you have to understand that while this is their livelihood, Jesse Lingard's not coming into your job telling you, oh, you messed that up. Why don't you just go die? It's I know it seems like a ridiculous comparison when the guy's making so much money, but it's I guess, yeah. And Sparky, it does go both ways. When the praise is there, of course it feels good, and the bank account feels good too. But sometimes the bank account, like there's just chemicals in your brain that just tell you not to be happy, and sometimes that's just it. And there's not enough money in the world that can fix that. There's not enough praise in the world that can fix that. There are plenty of people who are incredibly happy, or are successful, I should say, not happy, successful, but they don't feel happy, and that's just something that not necessarily his fault. He just might be wired a little differently. That's what it is.
I think the advantage they have is, obviously, anybody here, anybody in the audience that is not, making it rain, has, like some kind of like work stress and stuff like that. We all do. I guess the difference is, I mean, obviously we don't make as much, but at the same time, we don't have like 50,000 people. Like, you don't screw up at work and 50,000 people gather out in the parking lot and tell you suck or whatever, or, like start bombarding you with emails and messages.
Can you imagine leaving the office and everyone's just circled around your car?
You're a piece of shit.
You just holding your briefcase up, like, just stop.
But at the same time, I mean, at least, like, I think everybody has, to that certain extent, that kind of a stress going. But, I mean, the good thing is, I guess somebody like, Jesse Lingard can come out and say it and ideally be in a position where he can get help with it. Or, like, these clubs probably do provide, like, the support. I almost feel worse for, like, as, people who are more in the, the public audience who do not have that kind of support, and, get that professional help and stuff like that as easily as a guy like, somebody in the Premier League can, like somebody to talk to, blah, blah, blah. But it goes back up to Manning and stuff. Sparky has Sparky's in a no mercy mode this morning. Is like his job. You get always yes, that's the thing. It does come with the territory. But I think at the same time, I think the moral of the story in some ways that it's good to come out and actually acknowledge it more than ignore it and try to do something with it, because ultimately this is more like you're trying to cope with it. It's a lot better to cope with it, to be open about it and actually get help, instead of like drinking, for example, that he was doing. So ultimately we get down to that. Okay, let's talk about this over here, because one day I saw the headline and I was like, what is this about? As I was scrolling in the pre-show fist fights, you were like, oh, let's not even talk about this, but that just made it the reason to freaking talk about it. Those are famous last words. We're like, let's not talk about it. Okay, well, that means we're talking about it. So I did not even know about this till this morning. A white card was shown to the medical staff of the game, the women's game between Benfica and Sporting Lisbon. I'm assuming they came out to the field. I don't know the full reason as to why they got it. They just did such a great job and stuff. So apparently this white card is a thing they're doing in Portugal to almost like offset the red card. It sounds like something my little ones would have in their rec league if they brought the ball back or if they picked the player up, kind of a thing, to give white flag, like the white card, to somebody who did good. So when do you want to see this in the Premier League?
When do I want to see it in the Premier League?
How fast can we get this in the Premier League? I mean, does that even... I understand the reasoning behind it, but...
How about we introduce it once VAR is fixed, which means we will never see it, because VAR will never be at a point where it actually makes sense.
I don't know. Like, I get the sentiment, and it's probably cool to have, in... like lower leagues or something like that, like the youth leagues or something like that, so like kind of like improve fair play or something like that. I just couldn't be. And Ryan says, shouldn't it be orange? No, because that would be between being like bad yellow and extreme bad red. So that gives like still a negative vibe.
Orange card is like the 2-minute timeout where you put them on the side of the field for 2 minutes, right? It's not quite bad enough to be a red to get sent off, but it's worse than a yellow. So you go sit over there for 2 minutes, like hockey, and then come back in. I just want to see
you for 5 minutes right now. Like, I just didn't even talk to you right now. So you go sit on the bench, and then we'll talk about it later. Come back in 5 minutes, kind of a deal. Cosgrove says Everton waves the white flag every week. Why not a white card?
You just see the refs. I don't know. You see Michael Oliver running around with a white card. Every Everton player just go back to the locker room, you guys. It's fine. It's fine. I'm doing this for you. It's for your own good.
Yeah, I like to say it's probably a good sentiment and a concept for youth leagues, but I was like shocked to see it in a pro, because I feel like by the time people get to that level, it's gonna come across corny to them. They're not going to take it as, oh, this is like, I got a white card today, guys. Like, who goes, like, nobody at that level.
But you go back to the locker room and everyone's just like, everyone ignores you because no one wants to talk to the guy that got the white card. Like, why? What did you? No.
Or like, you lost 3-0, but you're like, but I got a white card, Dad. It's just like Yeah, that just doesn't
It's
like I
you know
say.
it's along the lines of the participation trophy thing, right? I mean, you
Yes.
got something. I think to play a little bit of devil's advocate, I think in a world where it might make sense is in a tournament style where there can be tiebreakers and having the white card as like you were mentioning earlier, as sort of a a fair play thing. If there's a tiebreaker where it comes down to the yellow red cards, maybe you just look at the white cards instead to see who was nicer, and then you send them through.
The problem with that is we can't even freaking agree on what's a yellow card. Why introduce another card that we're gonna fight over now? Like picking somebody up who you fouled. Is that a white card or
Maybe
or going getting the ball for the throw and you're like, here, it's your throw. And
let's head this committee, and then we will establish what is a white card and what isn't
this
a
should
white
be
card.
our goal. There you go. New year, new show, new formats. This should be our goal this year is to start the white card movement. We'll
Come
call
see
it.
the white card. That's not going to be good. Actually.
Yes, and I want audience to chip in. We need more ideas. Let's get this white card thing going on. But I'm gonna make white cards for the shows moving forward, and I will show it to maybe like Bickler or somebody tonight when he says something positive. You know what? I might just see how that goes. I'll probably never get to use it, but that's that's the problem with the Monday night podcast. I might not get to use it. Maybe on the morning I'll show it to Rami or something like that. See, this is a good idea. Way to tie it in, Sparky. Says, give it to Jesse Lingard.
Did Jesse Lingard hurt you emotionally, Sparky? Do you have some sort of connection that we don't know about? It sounds like this man really hurt you.
No, that's a good point, though. Maybe Jesse would not be as down if he was like 40,000 people are booing me, but that guy in the yellow shirt gave me a white card because I picked the guy up, kind of thing. Anything to feel positive. Anything to feel positive. Cosgrove says white cards should only be issued for the worst colored boots. Hey, man, there'll be a lot of white cards issued. Trust me, I see some like ridiculous stuff out there. And Sparky says just being a Manchester United player is good enough to be.
I mean, I would take a couple of those Manchester United players right now, but that's beside the point.
I would take. We were talking about who were we talking about on the Discord channel that I said like, we were talking about Mason Mount. I think there are certain players I find it's difficult to hate, despite being like Rashford is one of those guys. I just find it hard to dislike Rashford. It's very easy to dislike a guy like Bruno Fernandes or something like that. It just comes so natural. But there are certain players that I find it hard. That's probably like one of the. Honestly, it's rare. It's only maybe like 1 to 2 players,
but still,
per team, if that. Yeah. So what you got? Let's go back to you.
Well, let's see. We get your thoughts on this little fun graphic here. This is January spending. And I don't know if this includes Mudrik's deal. Honestly, I didn't fact check that. I apologize. But before
the
or
kind of research
after,
we put into the show over here, behind the scenes.
You guys have no idea how much time Timothy gives me to do these things. He messaged me at 8:54 going, "Hey, I have nothing. What can you come up with?" So I made this on my phone. And, it is what it is.
Lies. I should record the conversations. I will bring it up on Wednesday. I'll publish it.
If you do that, you don't get a white card because that is very
Damn
wrong. It's not nice.
In honor of the white card movements, I shall not do that.
You know what? I'm just gonna start just hitting you.
That's white paper. It's not like card. Jesus, we're gonna have to make these.
Okay,
so 171 million is a lot of freaking money. But at the same time, I mean, they've done this before. First of all, it shows how obnoxious perhaps it's almost like all these other leagues you see on the right side. Well, especially like the Bundesliga, League One and stuff, except like 1 or 2 clubs in each of them are more like feeder teams at this point to the Premier League. And it just shows like when we had the World Cup, how many players were coming from like the leagues in England. But at the same time, just spending money doesn't go very far because this is not the first time. We could have probably done this for summer. You could have done this for last January for Chelsea. And we see where they're at, which is why I think it should show that it's not just about money spent. It's money spent, but spent wisely as well. And that doesn't always mean it shouldn't be a lot. It should be little. Like you don't have to be frugal, but just spending it is just not good enough.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what I was going to ask is, do you think this is this sort of image that we're looking at, do you think that the Premier League is going to come to a point where it is just such a dilution of talent of players in one place? Do you think the rest of the leagues are going to suffer a lot if this sort of habit keeps up? You know, if you have more, let's say, more oil companies coming into the Premier League spending this kind of money on a regular basis, do you think other leagues are going to really suffer because of this? Or do you think there's a point where there's a bubble that sort of bursts, right, in the Premier League, where there's just so much money spent that there's something that pops, and I don't know, like the housing bubble of 2008, where everything gets so good, and everything and there's a point where it just crashes, and I don't know, I can't say the league's going to go bankrupt, but is there a point where there's too much money invested in the league, or do you think this league is going to just keep growing and growing and ultimately be the Super League of Europe? Rather than having teams from Italy and Germany and Spain in this Super League, you just have the Premier League, which has all the money.
That's interesting. I feel like it would be the latter, where it would not burst as bad as maybe like a housing boom, where, but in some ways, you're going to have a lot of clubs spending a lot of money, but not getting success. And I think that's eventually going to hurt those clubs, because obviously the income coming in. So we had this before, right? I mean, you're too young. You probably don't know, Polish Prince, but I mean, the Italian league, Serie A, used to be the league where all the good players would go to. But you remember those days?
I was around in the 90s.
You were around in the 90s? Barely. You were crawling around in the 90s. Is that what you mean? But I think it's just eventually obviously switched out, but that's some of the mismanagement. The money is totally different now too. I think at that time it was more about the league than the money. If the broadcasting and all that kind of stuff was more dominant then, I think that would have probably kept going a lot longer. It kind of burst a lot easier than I think it would now. The only thing I can think of it is to be able to keep up with these Chelseas and stuff like that. And more teams are going to be, sadly, sold to these countries, if you will. So they're going to spend the money. While these people don't have an end to the thing, that's where it comes to, and we'll talk about that, like Cosgrove talking about Chelsea giving out baseball-style contracts, 10 years and stuff like that. But we know in baseball, oh, God, why are we making me say baseball first thing in the goddamn morning, Cosgrove? But we know that kind of down the road can bite you in the ass, because that's still on the books. The problem is FFP being a joke, so it doesn't matter. And that's my only fear of going on and forever and being a Super League is, if you have regular people owning these clubs and you're pouring a ton of money and you're like, shit, we still got relegated despite spending so much, that might even things out. But if it's these guys literally shit money. So the money is no issue. This is more like a hobby, a little toy. You and I might get PlayStation. This guy gets a Premier League team. So we're talking kind of different finances over here. So, just because you lost a game, you don't throw the PlayStation away. You buy another game. So you go buy another player and stuff. So I feel like because of that, and these guys also own small teams in other leagues that are more like feeder teams now to their bigger toy kind of a deal. So I worry about that. I think it's going to, unless they fix FFP and cut out all these loopholes, I can see it going on for a long, long time.
Because if you could potentially, thinking about it this way, if you have all this money and you're attracting the best players from the world to come play in this league, there could be a new system in play that will help curb any of that money loss from any sort of relegation. There might be no relegation whatsoever. We see it here in the States where there's so much money invested in these teams. There's no chance there's a promotion relegation system because of the way the leagues are set up. There's no chance of that. So maybe we see a different structure if this sort of thing continues, where you're attracting all the best players and they don't want to play in Serie A or La Liga or with the Bundesliga or Liga because they want to play with the money in the Premier League. Maybe there's a completely new system that gets thrown in. I know this is obviously many years down the road, But that's something that could potentially happen too, because if you're taking all the talent and everyone just wants to watch this one league, even if you have a ton of money that's invested into, like, let's say Southampton, but they have a ton of great players from around the world, they might want to keep them in the league because they don't want them to lose the money, the league itself. So I don't know.
I mean, Spiky Box says have to have relegation, which I agree. That's what makes, I think, soccer a lot better than American sports. But sadly, we are seeing that money talks.
Right.
And, everybody went up in arms, and that was like the biggest thing, right? When when the Super League came about, it's like, how about all these smaller clubs and stuff like that? And everybody was like, no, blah, blah, blah. And then what is happening now in the background? FIFA is expanding the Champions League, kind of already making their Super League. And they took like 6 or whatever. Pretty soon, like you're saying, they might be like, do we even need a team from Portugal? And they might kick those guys out and they say, let's take Newcastle, let's take this, and then end up basically taking 12 things from the Premier League. And boom, there you go. You have a Super League, no relegation. I hate to say it. I mean, I'm kind of like old school, like Sparky, but sadly, money talks. And I can see that happening in like a decade or so. Slowly but surely. A lot of the things happening now, I don't think we would see it as happening back then. And I think this covers what, like Kazi is talking about, like Holland is a matter. There are certain guys, especially like South American players more than others, I think, that, idolize playing for Real and Barcelona because they have more like a global attraction than perhaps like Premier League teams. But that's the thing. If it's in the Super League, that's, they're kind of like, FIFA's working on it in the background over here, slowly but surely. Instead of like slapping you in the face, they're like slowly injecting it. And they might, if Real and Barcelona are in there. I mean, you look at like La Liga. Nobody says, I really want to go to and play for
Osasuna.
Yeah, Osasuna, man. It's my dream or anything like that. Yeah. But, there's like 2 teams there, maybe 2 teams in Italy. People might say like an Italian kid might want to play for AC Milan or whatever. If they take these teams, you never know. Sparky says there's a big difference. The clubs own the players in the EPL. In American sports, the players own their contracts. I'm not following that. Hold on. The clubs own the players. Yeah, I see what he's saying there, but Kazi says we want to get a Super League. We'll get Premier League clubs negotiating their own TV deals, or just like big clubs moaning, like in La Liga and Bundesliga. That's a possibility too. I just feel like it's going to become more and more. And despite us I hope this doesn't happen. I'm not saying like I wish for it or anything like that, but
yeah, I think we're both in a place where we don't want this to happen, but we're just seeing that the possibilities of having. What are the consequences of investing so much money into a league?
Yes,
and I think that could be one of them.
And I what I worry is we see the League Cup now, right? And we see the FA Cup. How much it means? How much did those things mean 2 decades ago? I mean, Sparky can talk this, Kazi can talk this, especially being from the other side of the ocean over here. But that how important, and to smaller clubs, it still is very important, the FA Cup and stuff like that, right? But for big clubs, is it really? Not really. I mean, if we won the FA Cup this year, we still consider it like a lame year or whatever because we wanted the league title or the Champions League. I fear that in 2 decades or so, league title will become the new FA Cup and League Cup in terms of importance, and the entire importance will shift to what you're doing in that Super League, that in the Champions League that they're creating on the other side, because there's going to be so many more games and stuff like that, to the point where we're like, they're talking about taking the big teams out of the League Cup because obviously there's more money over there. That's what I fear in two decades. Yeah, it'll still be here, but will it be as important, or will it just be the new League Cup that nobody knows the name of anyway? Is it still Carabao Cup? Is it still like different freaking Milk Cup? What I mean, like the names of it changes. We don't even know what it's called now. It's kind of like the Charity Shield, Community Shield kind of deal. It'll just go down in importance. That's what I fear.
It would be just like here, where the regular season doesn't mean anything. Obviously, it means enough for seeding, right? You get a higher seed or lower seed depending on how you finish the regular season in the sports here. But ultimately, you don't get a reward for being the best team in the regular season. If anything, the argument is there's too many games in the regular season. Basketball and hockey have 82 games. 30 of those don't matter essentially. Baseball, you've got 162 games. You can play 2 games in one day. I don't even know how that's an athletic achievement, but I'm nonetheless.
Because it's not athletic. Let me answer that for you. Because it's not fucking athletic. That's why.
Now the MLS as well, where they had a chance to break that mold, to break that system here, but they decided to go the American route, and now they play a ton of regular season games that don't mean anything either. And so that's, like you said, that's, I think, if we keep heading towards this super league, in essence, that is something that's going to turn the league, the regular season, into another meaningless. You got first, you got the most points that year, whatever. You were knocked out in the semis in the Super League. You're not good enough.
And that's the fear. I hope not. And I think, I love the league system. I think that's what makes soccer so much more special than any sports over here, because the abundance of games and the lack of importance of like the playoffs. The regular season and stuff like that.
Wanting to lose, for higher draft picks, like it's.
That's the thing. That it's almost like the sports over here is set up where even if you lose, you win, and the owners win and stuff like that. And that's what Spiker Bike says. There's a big what was it? Everything. Oh, Americans, please don't change our game. I don't think it's just a matter of Americans. I think it's more rich people because all these countries owning teams. See, they might not care about finances as much. I feel worse in some ways when rich people own it, because rich people don't want to lose money. Rich people don't want to get relegated, and they will be the ones like changing it. Let's just hope there's enough fan reaction to it that it doesn't happen. But man, this kind of stuff does not happen overnight. That's why I thought the way the big clubs tried to do the Super League was just like really stupid, and that's why you got the backlash, and they were like, oh, the fans win. When it's done slowly. So if like FIFA shows you guys don't know how to do scams, let me show you how it's done. And when UFA does that, they do it slow. They're like, how about we try this? You like that? And then they just this year, let's do this. Slowly and surely they will inject it more and more, and rich owners are gonna be like, I'm gonna make more money. Sure, that sounds about right. And they're gonna fight. Let's just hope it doesn't happen. I won't be around to see it. That's for sure. But I feel for you, Mateusz, because you might see those days with the
I'll be a baseball
Super
fan
League where people are passing white cars all over the place. This white car movement is really like picking up by that.
I don't know.
Lastly, let's go about
that.
VAR. It's not a show if you don't talk about VAR. So I know you had one on that.
Oh, yes, I do. However, I don't have it up.
I'll give the headline over here for you. Wait, the prep that goes into the show is going to be mind blowing. This is just a start, people. It's only going to get worse from here.
I had the pep for the prep, but not the VAR.
Starting at the Club World Cup, the refs said FIFA events will inform crowd and TV viewers. Clarification over VAR decisions. If this works, it will also be done at the U20 World Cup. And then the Women's World Cup, which means, we're kind of like feeling it out over here. And then we're going to bring it to the more important leagues or the Premier League, the top leagues and stuff like that. What do you make of it? Basically, he's going to come over there. Like I watched in the 49ers game yesterday, he's going to be like holding, like he was yanking his foot. So it's a penalty kind of a thing. I guess, does it matter in terms of how specific they make the explanation? If he comes out there and is like, we determined that it was a foul, it's like, okay, yeah, we get that because you gave a penalty.
Right.
Does it matter? I guess it depends on how much they explain it.
Yeah, I think because the one thing that I think a lot of us have been asking for with VAR specifically has just been transparency and understanding why one situation was deemed a handball while the other situation was not deemed a handball. And I think if these conversations allow us to better understand the mindset of why the call was made, not just what is the call, but why was this call made, I think that would go a long way for at least kind of respecting referee decisions more. I know that, we like to criticize referees all the time because that's just how sports are. That's not an American or an English thing. That's just a sport thing. because referees will make their decisions, and then there will be backlash, whether it's the right call or the wrong call. There's always going to be backlash. So I think as long as there is some sort of clear, transparent explanation as to why something was called a certain way, even if a team doesn't agree with that, we understand why it was called that way and we can go on. I think all of us would have loved to hear the explanation of Rashford's goal when he was offside and why they let that stand, Bruno's goal when Rashford was offside and why they let that stand, as opposed to, when another player was not even going for the ball and he was called offside because he was the only player near the ball. So I think as long as there's some sort of explanation and not just this is the call, I think it would go a long way.
Yeah, I think it really depends on. Yeah, Ryan says I don't mind hearing their explanation, so I can be really pissed at them. I think it really depends on like how well they explain it more than what they say. Like, say if they come out and say it has been determined and it contacted his hand. Okay, yeah, I get that, but why is it a penalty? Because isn't that a natural position? Blah blah blah. And I think that's going to be interesting to see. I'll tell you what. I mean, I would really like to see it happen, but just seeing what happened in the Turkish league, this is about like 3 or 4 weeks ago, where Galatasaray, who always gets shady decisions their way, had a goal against them overturned in VAR. And this goes back to like miking up the ref. So the story goes to that. So it's a very shady, like it's a goal. It looks pretty darn clear, kind of similar to the Qatar game, where like nobody knew what happened, like why the goal was. So the goal gets overturned, and it was like a huge outcry, like in the media and stuff. And so the federation released the freaking VAR records of the conversation of happening between the VAR refs and the ref on the field. Yada, yada, yada. Everybody's can't. And everybody's careers are over. Because you can clearly see they're trying to freaking find something to overturn the goal. Like just by the conversation, he's like, is it an offside? So the guy on the field is like, well, is it offside or what? He's constantly asking them. They're like, hold on, we're looking. There might be a foul. And they're like literally looking for something. And I wish they would mic him up like Sparky says, and we hear those conversations. But I'll tell you what, they released 2 conversations, got 6 people canned. So I don't. And then the federation came out and said, no, we're not going to do this weekly. This was like an isolated case, because people are like, well, now we want to know about this penalty. Why don't you like air those and stuff?
That opens up a big can of worms.
Yeah. Until they really open, they should though. Why shouldn't we have transparency as a fan or as the club, as a freaking player on the field? Why shouldn't you? You're owed, I feel like, the explanation of why a call was made. You shouldn't have to like kind of assume but it's a very slippery slope. And now you're seeing, I mean, there was like a kind of a mini formality cleanup in the Turkish league, for example. Now you see these refs that you never saw before, but then they're making other mistakes. And now it goes under they're new, they're not experienced, it's naive. It's not intentional and stuff like that. So is this true? Can we conclude do you have a link or anything for us, Sparky, to confirm this sad news? Maybe we can have like a moment of silence for Lampard over here. Yes, Frank Lampard's to learn his fate, and Everton sack manager Lampard. So I guess we're going to have to end this with a moment of silence for Fat Frank, and maybe give a white card to Everton for second. Actually, I kind of like was enjoying more and more Fat Frank's misery. I know I wanted this all along, but it's kind of like Tone, do you want him fired or do you enjoy the misery as you watch?
Because we might be at a point now where whoever they bring in might bring them out just enough of that misery where we'll have to see them again next year. If this had continued, maybe we would have been free of them for a year. So
I think so, because they were going down a slippery slope. Right? I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, Sparky Parky says, and I really love that, like refs are mic'd up in rugby and everything is clear. Is it because, I don't know, like I'm not a rugby guy, but is it because there's less scrutiny on rugby, not as many eyes, not as big of a sport? I mean, nothing against rugby fans. I'm not but I mean, worldwide, how many countries play rugby? How big is it? Is that why they can kind of get away with it? I feel like in NBA over here, when they review it, they give a huge explanation to at least to the TV audience in terms of, like, hey, this is what happened, so we're doing this. He's getting a technical. He's getting a technical. This way we can clean our hands, whatever. And then they announce it and they walk away. At least at the minimum, I would like something like that. But we said, it says, see, dude, you are the Polish prince. White card to Ryan right there for calling for. On that note, I don't think we could be. Sean Douche and Everton is another marriage. I guess the ideal scenario is Sean Douche becoming an Everton manager, getting relegated with Everton. Sean Douche at the same time, Frank Lampard fired. Hat trick of joy, and I'm a happy guy. It kind of offsets the miserable season we're having with the Reds. But
what miserable season? We're finishing. We're finishing third.
I don't even know why I said that. Yeah. Well, get your white cards ready. Yeah, that's the only thing you can do with the white card at this point. Well, it's time to call in the morning. Quite the fun Monday morning over here. Hope you guys enjoy your week. Tune in tonight for the Monday podcast where I pass out white cards to Gally and Bickler nonstop. And if they have not watched the show, look at the confusion on their face.
Yeah, you know what you should do? Just do that without any context. Every once in a while, just...
Yeah, because those bastards don't get up early, or even if they do, they're probably working or something, poor guys. But I might just make a white card and occasionally just show it on air and see when see when they catch on to it. Every time I like a point,
you better. I'm going to be watching. You better, because I need at least just one time, at least.
And I feel like the white cards should come out. Like, have you ever noticed like the British refs, which I really like, by the way, like the way refs in England show a card? Everything in England is so much more polite. That's why I love England.
It's not dramatic.
Like you go to South America or Spain, they come and they're like, in your freaking face and stuff like that. And then you go to like Premier League and he's like, here's the yellow for you, kind of thing. So I'm going to show the white card like that. I'm just going to be like, whites, and then just keep moving. See what happens. Well, Mitush, thanks a lot. The Prince, in effect, people, every Monday over here,
crown next week.
Dosage of the Polish Prince, as well as the fantasy show that I don't even want to talk about because I don't really even do it anymore. I haven't touched that team in a while. Sounds like you don't want to talk about it either. Yeah. Usually, if it was going good, you would be gloating right now.
The World Cup. The World Cup ruined me. In that.
Oh yeah. Well, the whole fantasy concept ruined me. You guys have a great week. See you guys tonight, and then the Monday show will be back on Wednesday, where we will have our. Let's see if this name sticks as well. American Scousers, Egyptian King. Rami is going to be on with us. I'm going to make that stick as well. If Prince stuck, I'll show him a white card, see if he gets that. Have a great day, everybody. See you guys. Take care.